Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin.
Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, a serial technology entrepreneur who's launched 30 companies, failed at 20 of those, but scaled 10 of those to success. That roller coaster of a ride is in my book. It's called Fail Hard, Win Big. And this is where I teach you how to turn failure into your biggest competitive advantage and how custom software played a defining role in every win. Now I'm the CEO of Sonatify Technology. We are a US-based software engineering company with teams throughout Latin America and the US. We help existing and new software teams expand. Today, I am joined by a fun guest who you're going to enjoy. If you're watching us on YouTube, you're going to see how fun she is with her multicolor hair. If you're just listening on Apple and Spotify, I'm sure her personality will come through. And this is Charity Majors, and Charity has been an engineer, rose up through the leadership ranks, spent time at Facebook, now is CTO and co-founder of a company called Honeycomb IO. Charity, welcome.
Thanks for having me. 30 companies. What is wrong with you?
I am a textbook definition serial entrepreneur, and I have always created companies and then companies to support those companies. And I've certainly had a lot of ventures throughout tech, throughout real estate investment, throughout marketing. And at first I was I was like, do I really want to start publicizing that I failed at 20 companies?
Yeah. Do it.
And one of my buddies who is an ex-Major League Baseball player, he's like, Steve, if you were in baseball, that's a 333 batting average. You'd be in the Hall of Fame. And, a lot of people don't like to talk about their failures. And in business, if you're not failing, I don't think you're pushing hard enough.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you, Charity. Charity, walk our listeners through the journey of your career.
Just a second. I come from the operations side of the house, SRE, DevOps. I was one of the last of the generation of sysadmins when I got started. And not many ops people start companies is something I found. And I think it's because we expect everything to fail. I started this company 100% expecting we'd go out of business within a year or two, but I was along for the ride. And I feel like it's a real superpower to expect failure. I tell people Honeycomb will fail eventually. My goal is for us to fail like Splunk failed, to become a company that's so big and profitable and slow that we're all rich and none of us want to work there anymore. Anyway, yeah, I'm all in. I'm all in on the failure story. So I grew up in the backwoods of Idaho. I was homeschooled, fundamentalist compound. I ran away and went to college on a piano scholarship when I was 15, which was in the early days of the internet. I had never used a computer before, but I pretty quickly realized that all of the music majors were still hanging around the music department 10, 20, 30, 40 years after they got their degree, working minimum wage jobs. And God bless them, but I grew up poor and I was not going to be poor as an adult. So I switched to computers and my timing was flawless. I came to San Francisco when I was 19, been here ever since. And I kind of made a career niche for myself, being the first infrastructure engineer to join a team of software engineers when they're just starting to get onto something, and this crap we just threw together needs to scale and we got to bring in someone to professionalize. I've done that a few times. The last startup I was at, Parse, got acquired by Facebook. I had a sort of transformational experience there using Facebook's tools on our infrastructure, and that's how Honeycomb was born. My co-founder and I were the only two female engineers at Parse, I guess, and we started a company. It's been almost 10 years. We pioneered the category of observability. When we got started in 2016, it was just monitoring and logging, and now literally everyone who has anything to do with software and graphs calls it observability. I'm definitely not still a little bitter about that, but it's fine. It's fine. Cool. No, Honeycomb's doing great. I think the AI era is really exciting because the key of every high-performing engineering organization is fast feedback loops, really tight feedback loops. And observability is the feedback loop of feedback loops. It's your sense-making apparatus of these complex socio-technical systems. and it's never been more necessary.
So Charity, and I want to jump into Honeycomb more, but so you said you had a humble upbringing. You got into the tech space as an infrastructure engineer. You built your way on some good roles. What made you take the risk of starting your own venture and, kind of get away from the security of the good jobs that you built, especially putting in light that you said you didn't grow up with a whole lot? What made you take that leap?
I don't know, opportunism, I guess. I've never had a pedigree, I'm serial dropout. I've always been in startups. Nobody knew my name. And then after the Facebook experience, which I didn't even want, but I was there, fine. When I was leaving, some VCs were kind of like, would you want a couple $1 million to try something? And I was just kind of like, on behalf of all women and queers and dropouts, I accept. I will try something. We'll definitely fail. But like if somebody's giving me the money, why not try? Also, I just gotta say, like, to someone who grew up weeding and with their hands in the dirt, it's hard for me sometimes to feel like what we do is work. So like the security angle doesn't really, I can always get a job, right? Hands on keyboard, typey, and I'm clean and I get to shower and go to bed. It's just like, how hard is it really?
Gotcha. I love it.
You
Well,
told me
so
not to be boring. I think I can do that.
I had no doubt that you would have a challenge with that. None whatsoever. So tell us more about Honeycomb. Who's using your platform? Your company is almost 10 years old. You've gone through multiple rounds of funding. Tell us more.
Yeah. It's 10 years. God, it's so weird. But it hasn't been like, and for those who aren't watching, it hasn't been like slow linear growth over 10 years. It's been was flat for like 3 or 4 years. And then it started to take off. And now it's like very up and to the right. Part of that's just we were ahead. We were very ahead of the market. We were building ahead of the market. And a lot of the things we were saying about complexity have just they're 10 times more true than they were, So who uses Honeycomb? Right now, I would say it is, for better or for worse, the best engineering teams in the world. And that sounds like a pat on the back, but it's actually, as a business person, you actually don't want to just be usable by a small slice of folks. And we're trying to, we would like to. It is so much easier to treat your telemetry data just like data than to be like, well, your metrics go over there, your logs go over there, your traces go over there, your errors go over there, your acceptance go over there, your profile data goes over there. And then trying to how do you connect all those data sources? Well, you are the only thing that connects them, right? You're sitting here eyeballing graphs and timestamp. It's madness, but that's the way things have always been done. And so there's always a bit of a challenge in doing something new. Honestly, I would say we're trying to do for software engineers right now what business analytics went through about 20 years ago when columnar storage engines first came out. And they adapted to a world where you could slice and dice, you could zoom in to individual transactions, you could zoom out and see. And software engineers, the cobbler's children have no shoes. They're still hacking things together instead of treating their own telemetry like first-class citizens.
Gotcha. Well, tell us about some of the projects you're working on and some of the cool stuff you guys have rolling out.
We just we had an AI week last week, and we launched a whole suite of things. Feedback loops of feedback loops. Every observability company out there has a killer demo when it comes to MCPs, and then you start using it, and it just doesn't work. And ours does, which is really exciting. In fact, our own sales team and my co-founder, Christine, also a software engineer, but she's, been running a company for a few years now. They use our MCP all day to analyze how people are doing in each stage of the sales loop and what kind of features are people using and who are the early adopters and who are the champions. And it's really exciting because, as long as I've been doing this, we've been trying to figure out how to I feel like the borders of tools are what create silos in organizations. You start spending all your time arguing about the nature of reality instead of solving the problem together. So the idea of everyone using the same data is really exciting.
Very cool. Well, tell us about your genius engineering team that's pulling off all the great things you guys are doing.
It's ironic you say that. I actually wrote an essay a while ago called In Praise of Normal Engineers. I think there's this tendency in our industry to look for the 10x engineering meme has been like much dunked on.
That's the buzzword lately, that 10x engineer.
But like in my world, I think that the best engineering orgs in the world are the ones where pretty normal engineers with a normal amount of experience, normal amount of background, can show up every day and move the business materially forward day after day, week after week. And like the reality is those organizations are the ones that actually mint real world-class engineers, because engineering greatness, you achieve it by learning. And every time you ship, you learn something, right? You achieve it by learning from the people around you and collaborating on things. If you're a team that can ship a line of code in 5 minutes and your team ships 200 times a day, if you work at that company for 2 years, you are going to amass more experience and more learning than you would for I did the math with, working for 30 years at a company that ships once a month. Like, it's absurd. It's insane, right? So I do have a genius engineering team. They're amazing. But we didn't go out. Christine and I, when we started building the company, we could have gone out and looked for all of our, our past coworkers at Google and Facebook and stuff. And we very intentionally did not do that, because we're trying to build a tool for everyone. We're trying to build a tool that, and I've seen so many other companies build what they know, but what they know, their experience is so small, but it's not legible to anyone outside that experience. So, from the beginning, we brought on folks from hack academies and folks, from non-traditional backgrounds and folks from, startups and big companies and stuff. And unfortunately, many of those folks are now world-class engineers, and we have to get a new crop of, folks who are closer to the ground. But I really do think that a healthy engineering org is constantly bringing in new blood, junior blood, because they ask the best questions.
Now, so you have about 80 engineers on your team. You guys are all remote. How do you manage that? How do you deal with different time zones?
Oof, wow. Okay. Time zones is really the pressure point there. I think that a distributed team it's different than an in-person team, but it's not. Managing across time zones is very hard. So we do try and keep people, within time zones with each other. So I had a bit of a crisis. We always wanted to be a distributed company. So from the beginning, we would do things like once a quarter, we'd have a work from home week where everyone had to work from home. And we always made it, we always asked people not to sit next to their team members, try and force the interactions online. I feel like distributed teams are better for parents who can go and work from their kids' soccer games. They have flexible schedules. It's just better to bake that in early, because it's really hard to do it later. When COVID happened, we had actually hired our very first remote VP the week before lockdown started. So we were in decent shape. But actually this last year, I've had a bit of a crisis of faith in distributed companies. Because I had seen some things happening where a project that really, a choke point, let's say, took 2 months to resolve, when if people were in the same room, it would have been like an afternoon, because you couldn't lob the ball to anyone and walk away. You have to look each other in the eyes, So we're not going back to an in-office thing, but I've been thinking about how to get the best of both worlds. And one of the things that we're trying to do is get people together 3 or 4 times a year. We have an all-company offsite in January. I just got back from the R&D offsite. Go-to-market has an offsite. And we try to get teams to get together once or twice. There's a halo of trust that gets created when people get together. And it lasts. No. It lingers for 2 or 3 months. After the all-hands offsite, there's just this feeling of love, right? People want to do things for each other. There are little interactions that they had that make them just smile when they, when they're each other. And those interactions resonate and linger years afterwards. So use the halo, right? Just try and get people together once a quarter. And for engineering teams in particular, I think being mindful of getting people together in the design phase. How many whiteboarding apps have people written? A gazillion. It's still not as good. It's just having everyone.
I was going to say, I've yet to find a good one that replaces in-person whiteboarding.
And I've come to just accept that. We evolved for high bandwidth, interpersonal interaction. There's just a lot more data to work with. So try and remind people to get together in the early stages of a project or get together when there's been turnover on the team. There's a new manager, right? There's a new tech lead. There's just some people left, some people just get them together. You don't even have to do work together. Just go bowling or something. See each other's faces. Remind each other why you like each other. There are people who can come across as really blunt and acerbic and just sort of like almost mean until you can hear their voice in your head as they're typing. And then you're like, oh, that's just you, right? Oh, that's just, you know. So yeah, I'm a big fan of, I will say for me personally, I'm a huge introvert. My tolerance for humans has been nosediving in a way that's personally bothersome. Like I'm hiding in the bathroom after a couple of hours in an event. So I'm looking for ways in my personal life to balance that. But I'm a big fan of distributed teams, but I think you really do want to look for the best of both worlds.
I like it. So, as a tech leader here, more than halfway through 2025, what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing now?
We sent around our own version of an AI mandate a little bit ago. I'm pretty anti-mandate. I would describe my politics as anti-authoritarian, like kind of compulsively, not helpfully to an extent, anti-authoritarian, which, yes, as I was CEO for the first few years, and that does really create some weird cognitive dissonances. But like mandates in particular, for me personally, someone gives me a mandate, it's automatically the last thing I want to do. Like I have a really excessive rebel streak, I guess. But I started to realize that when our customers are rolling out Honeycomb, they're far more successful with an executive mandate just because of inertia. Because when you've got something that kind of works, it kind of takes a lot to push you out of that to try new things. So we looked around at, there's been so many CEO letters, right? And a lot of them, honestly, just make my eyes roll. But we sent one around. We're like, this is what it means to us. I took a lot of inspiration from the CTO of Intercom wrote one called, the title of the post is just 2X. That's it, it's 2X. And he's like, look, I think that I consider calling this 10X, but, I think that would be unrealistic. But yeah, given what the tools we have now, the people we have now, I think we should be able to 2X our productivity in the next year. And honestly, what an opportunity. This has never happened in my lifetime. It will probably never happen again. We couldn't 2X our productivity if we doubled the size of Honeycomb, which we can't afford to do, right? Because there's diminishing returns. There's the communication tax and but like there's a real opportunity to literally, who doesn't want that for themselves, right? And so the way that we positioned it to folks was, this is your opportunity. The next time you go out for a job, first thing anyone's going to ask you is, what's your experience with AI? This is your opportunity to learn, to experience. This is us admitting that we know your productivity is going to dip before it 2Xs, and that we're trying to carve space and time and support for that. We're telling all of our managers to work with you. Let some deadlines slip, because at the stage we're at, I think anyone who tries to give an executive mandate that's like, we're going to double our productivity and here's how you're going to do it. Now they're just smoking crap. Like that's just not.
Well, that's also why 95% of AI pilots are failing.
Yeah.
Because they're not being realistic.
And right now, I do believe that doubling is more than realism. But you can't look at a team from the outside and predict how they're going to find that. It really has to come bottoms up. It has to come from people who feel supported in this, not like they're training their replacement. They need to trust that you're not just trying to like work them out of a job, but like individual engineering has always been such a powerful career. Every company is now a tech company. Where does that value get created? Engineers, typing, right? So making people feel supported, making sure they have the tools that they have, making sure that security and compliance and all, and then just like enlisting them, their help, and figuring out how to make it true for every role and every.
I like it. I mean, you have over 80 engineers on your team. That's a good size engineering org. I'm assuming you guys use your tool to manage your engineering teams.
Yes, quite a lot, all the time. Everybody should have good, rich, interactive, real-time, fast, granular observability. It really is. when it's hard to ask questions of your system, when it's hard to understand your system, people ask fewer questions. I was working with a company a few years ago who they had monitoring dashboards. Is it up? Is it down? Is it slow? But if you wanted to ask any real specific question about how this user's experience was or how this feature flag for this group, you had to wait till the next day because every night all the day's data would get rolled out to the data warehouse, and then you could use business analytics tools to ask questions of your software. And like, come on, this should be professionally humiliating to us as software engineers. Like, this is not okay. So that means that most questions never get asked, right? Because you've forgotten by the next day, or you've found a hack, or it's just not that important. When you make it fast and easy and frictionless, the best engineers I've ever worked with are the ones that have spent, they basically have two buffers in front of them all day. They've got their IDE and they've got Honeycomb. And they're just constantly going back and forth. They're shipping fast and they're like, how did this work? How did this work in reality? I shipped it. I put it on a feature flag. Maybe I turned it on for some test users. What's actually happening, right? Unit tests are great, but tests really just tell you whether or not you regressed. You can't rely on them to tell you what's actually happening, right? But hooking up that fast feedback loop, like the observability industry talks so much about outage and downtime, and all those things are important, but that's like first base. The real value to unlock is building better products, looking for opportunities, seizing those, exploiting. Like everyone who works in product has a story of how a thing they were working on turned out to be something completely different. Instagram was famously an app called Bourbon that was like location sharing, but nobody was doing anything but looking at each other's pics, so they pivoted. Twitter was like a podcast platform. There's so many stories where if they weren't paying close attention to how their code was actually intersecting with the real world and what people were actually excited about, they would have missed the plot.
Is there an ideal engineering team size that it makes sense to bring in a platform like Honeycomb? I mean, do you need to have 20 or 30 engineers to make use of the platform?
It's never not better. Never not better. It's never not better to have that sort of granular. But there is a point where, so a metaphor that I sometimes use is finance. If you're like a normal person who has, a paycheck, or mortgage, you have a bank account, right? You just need a personal finance app, check your balance a couple times a month, maybe have an alert, let you know if you're running out of money or something. That's all you need, right? That's basic monitoring. And then there's like, you're a bank. You're a finance platform. You've got millions of accounts. They all have different interest rates. You've got all these different asset classes. You've got appreciation and depreciation and all this stuff. And you've got taxes. And if you fuck it up, you're going to jail. It's like, and like that's observability. Complexity is what monitoring is very much about outcomes, right? Operational outcomes. But our systems, like it's like the lamp stack versus the CNCF. Nobody can hold that in their head and reason about it. That's the point where you just kind of have to like submit and go, it's actually gonna be faster, cheaper, and easier if I put in the upfront investment to instrument and understand my systems instead of constantly playing catch up.
Makes sense. So Charity, you've done a lot throughout your career. You're 10 years into your company. What are some brutal lessons that you've learned that you wish you would have knew a little earlier in your career?
One is that if you are a startup, you can get good R&D leaders from very early on the basis of having a good team, a good culture, a good product, great customers. You earn the right to hire the go-to-market execs that you so desperately need. They don't really care how cool engineers think your widget is. They are looking at some very different things. Mediocre versus great go-to-market, they're all saying the same words, honestly, but the outcomes are night and day. Another very lesson that for baby startups, if there are any founders that are listening to this, you can't hire someone to run sales for you in the beginning. You have to master that motion before you hand it over to someone. It will never work. I don't care how trusted they are. I don't care how great they are. I don't care how. No, I too said those things. No, it won't work until you yourself master it.
You're almost preempting chapters in my book because I have that book as a founder. If you can't sell, you got something wrong because nobody else can do it for you. until you get some scale.
And there's this vibe in engineer that many engineers have. There's this sort of snob. I don't know. I call it sometimes engineering supremacy, where they're just like, oh, well, our craft is pure and unsullied, and you marketing, and so anyone can do that. You really need to knock it the fuck off. Like, that is, first of all, it's not true. Second of all, no, none of the good people are going to come work for you or with you with that attitude. And like, these are de- and the thing is, like, there's a lot of really crappy sales and marketing in the world, and I get it. And that's stuff that we know. Well, I don't care how good of an engineer you are. You rely on marketing to make decisions, but you don't call it marketing when it's good marketing. You don't notice it as marketing when you like it, right? So I think that, like, something that Christine and I did accidentally right early on was when we were hiring engineers, if anyone kind of talked shit about go-to-market folks, even just sort of like holding them off to this, we didn't hire them. Like, we tried to like make it very clear these were our peers. They're just as valuable as you.
I thought you were going to say you lock them in a room together for a week with a little bit of food and water and make them learn how to get along.
Maybe in my next startup. But I really do think it's important for many reasons, beginning just with like being an ethical, empathetic human being. You shouldn't treat people that way. But it also really does have material business outcomes.
So Charity, as a woman in tech, and especially starting on the infrastructure side, I think there's even less women on that side of the fence than the software engineering side. What advice do you have for other women out there in a male-dominated area?
I'll tell you the advice I give young women, but it's not super, like, some people don't like it. So I came from, like I said, fundamentalist compound, right? The misogyny there was really obvious. Like, you were married and pregnant and barefoot in the kitchen when you were 19. And because of that, I think I got into tech, and for a long time, like, I didn't see any problems. Because, like, oh, microaggressions, oh, I'm getting paid 20% less, haha, it just like didn't even register with me. I'm just dust off my shoulder, That was protective for me. And I think later in my career, I really had to learn to see these things and to be sensitive on behalf of others. But like, for women who are entering the industry, I would say your job is you. Your job is not to fix the world. Your job is not to, you focus on learning what you need to learn, getting to senior some power, then get sensitive, right? Doesn't do you or anyone else any good if you're so sensitive in the early days that you're just like, it's okay to have a thick skin. It's okay when you are at the bottom of the food pyramid. It's okay to be a little selfish. Get some power, then do something good with it.
I like it. Charity, thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today. It's great to see how you have a unique perspective, how you built your way up through the tech world to be a founder within an extraordinarily impressive company that investors keep going in. Congrats to you. Before we wrap, what's some no BS advice you have for tech leaders out there trying to build, scale, or just survive in these interesting times?
Say this. I will say your investments into AI are just money into a sinkhole if you don't have good enough reliability and observability. The only companies out there that are seeing returns in those investments are the ones where they're not just tossing chaos into chaos, right? They can see the return, they can ship codes, understand it, and also where their workers feel relatively safe. I'm not going to say safe because no one's safe in capitalism, but like where they trust you, right? There's got to be some trust. There's got to be some ability to understand your stuff, or you can't jump to the last chapter of the book.
Excellent. Charity, thank you so much. Congrats on the success you've had. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you like the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you didn't like it, well, we're just going to share it with your competitors. Might be the edge they need. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time.
That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.